So hello from Green-Mopeds in London. So today we're following up on our ride review of the Cypher with a static view, and as the sort of nearest competitor to it is a Super Soco TSX, we've put it next to one of those, and we'll just go around the bike, talk a bit about them, and hopefully that will help you in your research. So let's get to it. So a little bit of background on the Lexmoto Cypher. If you actually look on their website, you'll see a part number that begins at ZN, and they do quite a few bikes, petrol bikes, that have a part number beginning ZN, and ZN stands for Zhongshen. So Zhongshen is out of China, and Cineco, which is where this comes from, is owned by Zhongshen, and Cineco is the sort of electric division of that company. Okay, so if you want to actually do your own research on Cineco, go to cineco.cc. It is predominantly a Chinese site, but you can get an English version, and you will find information on what they call the City Slicker. This is that bike, the Cineco City Slicker, so look that one up. We've put it next to a Super Soco because Super Soco sort of own the entry-level electric motorbike class, if you like. The first one that they had was actually this little TS down here, which was a 2017, as you can see from the plate. A little 1200 watt electric motorbike, came with a 60 volt, 26 amp hour battery, and that was the only model. When we first got into electric motorbikes, that was the only offering in a motorbike class. And then Super Soco brought out the TC in 2018, and then the TSX, which was the same bike, but with a different body. The reason we're putting these side by side is a little bit around the styling, but more really to do with an entry-level bike for 16-year-olds. Okay, so this is sort of like your choices if you want your son, or if you're just looking for a bike to get to college or something like that, or starting work. This might be a couple of the bikes you consider. When you're 16 though, you can only ride a 28 mile an hour bike, but when you get to 17, you can ride a bike that goes over that. In fact, a 125cc equivalent bike, which is every bike that we sell is either one of those. Okay, so even up to bikes that are 19 kilowatts. Okay, so and they go 80 odd miles an hour. Once you get to 17, you can ride those bikes. But of course, when you're 16, you might want a bike that you can actually go from being a 28 mile an hour bike to something more. And when Super Soco came out, you could do just that. You could take any of these bikes, in fact, the TS, the TSX, or the TC, and de-restrict them. There was a method that you went through on the handlebars, and it would take it from being a 28 mile an hour bike, 50cc license, to a 125cc license equivalent, doing about 45 miles an hour. And we still get calls even today about de-restrictable bikes. And is Super Soco still allowing de-restrictable bikes? The answer is no. And the reason for that is basically because of this bike, the Wanderer. So the Wanderer's come out, and it has come out as a 45 mile an hour bike. There's also obviously the Street Hunter as well. And it would be silly in a little respect for Super Soco to allow the TSX and the TC to then be de-restrictable to about the same speed as the Wanderer and the Street Hunter. It would just erode each other's market. Okay, so what they've basically chosen to do is stop de-restriction on the TSX and TC. They did it in two ways. First off, they actually stopped you from doing the sequence, which I can show you on the City Sticker or Cypher, which was basically to turn the bike on holding the brake and the handlebars, counting to 10, and that was it. They stopped that working by requiring you to have a rollback of the firmware, which dealers could do, or dealers that had the kit could do. Not all dealers have the kit. But now they've decided to stop it completely because of the Wanderer and the Street Hunter, for the reasons I've just said. So basically, if you want a de-restrictable motorbike style electric bike, then this is your choice, because it still allows it. Okay, you will actually find on the internet the process, but it's not a big secret. I can show it to you. And that will take this bike from being 28 to being over 40. Okay, and therefore if it's the primary use case is I want my 16-year-old son or daughter to have a bike to start with, and then when they get to 17, not to have to throw it away and get another one, then this is the sort of bike for you. Okay, so that's a sort of long-winded background, but just to go into a little bit more about the bikes themselves. So as you can see, the first thing to notice is the wheel size. Okay, and this is something that you either love it or hate it, or don't particularly mind, you will get on with it. Super Soco have 17-inch wheels pretty much as standard on their motorbike range, whereas Lexmoto have gone for Cineco have chosen 12-inch wheels. So some people don't like 12-inch wheels, or smaller. In fact, there are 10-inch wheel bikes out there. You could understand it. They're essentially less stable. Going over potholes might be a bit more of a problem. But for whatever reason, it sort of goes with the proportions of this bike to have 12-inch wheels. As you can see, they are pretty wide profile, wider than the TSX and the TC, and actually probably the TC Max as well. So in that respect, there's still quite a lot of rubber that's hitting the road, but they are still 12-inch wheels. You notice that it's at the front disc brakes, just like on the TSX. But what you'll also notice is on the TSX, you get two cables going in and out of the brake caliper. So that means there is CBS on this bike, combined braking. Okay, so when you squeeze the right-hand lever, you're getting a proportion of the brake power going to the back. There is not that on the Cypher. Okay, just as you can see there, one cable going into the front caliper. All right, so it is front on the right lever, back on the left lever. Not necessarily an issue, it's just that they have chosen not to do it. If you look at the front two, if you can see in this light, the light bulb here is actually a bit more of a traditional filament-based one, whereas all the others are LED. Not too sure why they couldn't have just gone for LEDs all round, but there you go. Okay, in terms of actual dimensions, so the Cypher is actually shorter than the TSXs and TCs by about 10 centimeters. Okay, so whether that's good or bad, it's quite a small compact machine. If you look at the actual seats, the seat that you get on it though is actually bigger than on the TSX, longer. However, it's got quite a sort of lip to it, ridge, and that means that your sort of space for the passenger to go on is pretty limited, although not as limited as on the TSX. Okay, so whether this is really a two-person bike sort of remains to be seen. It does have the pegs if you wanted to, but you have to bear in mind a couple of other things. So both of these bikes are 1.5 kilowatts. Okay, so 1.5 kilowatts is 2 horsepower. Okay, 28 mile an hour out of the box, and in the old days, the TSX used to go a bit over 40, whereas the Cypher can still do that. Okay, they both weigh under 90 kilos, so pretty lightweight, but that's excluding the batteries. The Cypher is 82 kilos, and the TSX and TC are 78 kilos. Okay, so not a lot in it. I did try and wonder why the Cypher is heavier, bearing in mind it's smaller, but maybe it's just more frame to it. But otherwise, you know, they're pretty similar in terms of that. So going around a bit more, here's the next difference between them. As you can see there, maybe it's a bit clearer from this side, the Cypher doesn't have a hub motor. Okay, this is, it's still a hub motor in principle, it's just it works differently. You can do that research yourself if you want to find out why that is a hub motor. There is the motor on the TSX in the back wheel. So on this one, of course, you have a belt. Now, having ridden this bike, I have to say, you hardly know. If you ride a TC Max, for example, you know that it's not a hub motor. It's not a significant amount of noise, but there is noise from the belt. And if you had a chain, obviously, then there'd be even more. But I am surprised how quiet this bike is, considering it's got a belt drive. Okay, pleasantly surprised, I would say. Okay, so 1500 watts each. And then a bit more around the back. As you can see, they've both got disc brakes at the back. Okay. The lights here and indicators are pretty standard. They've sort of made a big thing about doing this sort of design on it. Okay. The shock is adjustable on the TSX. If you turn this, you can actually make the ride firmer. And the same thing on the Cypher. You can actually adjust that to strengthen or make the ride harder or softer. Okay. As you can see, there's here the pegs and here the pegs here. Now, when it comes to batteries, there is another quite big difference. So this is where the Cypher battery is. It's semi-removable. By semi-removable, I mean it is removable, but you have to get through this. I'm not saying it's not possible, it's just, it's not as easy as on a TSX or TC. So you have to undo the Chigori, you have to take off that, you can unlock it. I mean, it's very wise to have a lockable battery. This frame then lifts off and then you pull the battery out. The battery's T-shaped, literally. I mean, that is the edge of it there, and it sort of goes around like that. It's an interesting design. I guess they've done that to fit a lot of, as many cells as they could into it. And this is where you charge it from if you want to leave it on the bike, which you would most of the time. Okay, so you just connect it up there. So on a Super Soco bike though, you've obviously got what goes under the lid. Okay. Oops. So underneath here, you get your second key. You get a tray, which unfortunately now is not big enough for the charger, and you get the 1 or 2 batteries. So again, a difference between the two. So on the Cypher, you get one 72 volt, 26 amp hour battery, and on the TSX, you can get one 60, 30 amp or 2. Okay, now, you would think maybe that because it's got a 30 amp hour battery, it would go further than the 26 amp hour battery of the Cypher. That would be okay if they were the same voltage. But if you actually do the maths on both of these bikes, what you'll actually find is that the Cypher has got 78 watts more capacity than the TSX with one battery. Okay, so really it's a case of 60 by 30 by 72 by 26, and the maths literally works out 78 watts difference, and the Cypher is the one that has more. Okay, so interestingly, I guess that means that bearing in mind that both of these bikes are the same engine power or motor power of 1500 watts, then you would think that they would do about the same range. And that's the sort of conclusion I've come to with one battery. Obviously, if you add the second battery to the TSX, then it's going to do twice as much. Quoted range on the Cineco website is 100 kilometers for the range of the Cypher, but that is at 16 miles an hour or 20 kilometers an hour. Obviously, no one's really going to be riding at that. So the realistic range of this is going to be about the same as a TSX or TC, which is about 30, 35, something like that, if you don't de-restrict it. Okay, so coming back to the de-restriction and how does that work? We'll talk about charging times in a minute. So on this bike, and in fact, this is almost the same as how it used to be on the TSX and TC. To de-restrict it, the bike has to be off, and I can't show it to you because I need another hand, but what you need to do is turn the bike on doing that, holding the brake and the throttle open. Okay, you'll see an error come up on this error here, coming up on the dash, because that is actually being recognized. But if you count to 10 and then release it, it will be de-restricted. The same process to restrict it back. Okay, and that's it. On the TSX and TC, it used to be that, but for 10 seconds. But you had to have the side stand down. With the Cypher, you don't have to have the side stand down. One of the things that I quite like about this from a safety perspective is that it will always start in P, whether you have the side stand down or not. Okay, whereas on bikes that have a push button for the start button here, you could leave this in and turn the bike on with the side stand up, and it would be in ready straight away. Okay, so it is a sort of safety feature. The P also comes on automatically, I've noticed, so another good safety feature there. So just going around the dash as we're here. So here is how to get it in and out of P. Here is your Sport and Eco. So Eco will get you in D-restricted mode to about 30, and Power will get you to over 40. Around the dash, pretty clear dash. You've got a diagnostic button there. You've got a select button which can swap the speedo from miles to kilometers, etc. You've got a reverse button there, which is in some respects a funny place to put it, but that will put you into reverse if you really needed reverse. And then you've got your hazard lights and full beam, and then a flasher, okay, and then horn and indicators. Unfortunately, indicators are silent, but it's not the first time. Okay, so on the TSX, of course, you've got stuff that you've probably seen before. 3 modes on this one, 1, 2, and 3. Your ready button. Around the dash, you've got this. This will show you consumption of power. As it goes up, you're drawing more power. You've got your trip, state of charge, etc., etc. Horn, also silent indicators. A redundant button, which used to be to turn the lights off, which was only available. Well, it's not available in the UK because of Euro 5 standards, and then your full beam, etc., etc. Okay, brake calipers, cylinders for brake fluid, front and back. Okay, and that's it. So, also, having shown you underneath the lid of the TSX, this is what you get under the lid of the Cypher. So, a decent amount of space for bits. Obviously not helmet-sized bits, but still a decent amount of space. This is the charger, and this is a 6 amp charger. Okay, so 6 amps. The TSX and TC, when they first came out, only had a 5 amp charger, and the charging time for that was, for one battery, was 6 to 7 hours. Okay, now on this one, on the in the manual, it says that 7 to 8 hours. Which I guess is about right for the amp hours and the kilowatt hours of the battery. Okay, so 10 amp charging will obviously halve the time of a 5 amp charger. Okay, so again, underneath here, you've got your 1 or 2 batteries, and what you do is you swap the cable over onto that one when you want to get the other battery going, if you bought a dual battery bike. Okay, so that's that. So that's charging time of 7 to 8 hours on the Cypher, 3 to 4 hours on the TSX, 1 battery. Okay. So colours, interestingly, there are 6 colours available in China for this bike, but we only get black with red accents. So by accents, I mean this part of the frame here is red, but most of the body is black. The TSX has 4 colours. The TC has a different 4 colours. Panels are interchangeable, actually, between the TC and TSX, so you could have a racing green TSX if you wanted to. But yeah, only 2 colours for the Cypher. Okay, so I guess lastly it comes to price. So September the 2nd, 2023, the Super Soco sale has now ended, their Kickstart sale, and the price of the TSX is now back to £2,800, okay, 1 battery. 2 batteries would be about 3,400. The Cypher, though, is currently at £2,120, so 600 odd pounds cheaper. So I guess the question is it worth it? So there are some things that it hasn't got. So obviously it hasn't got easily removable batteries. It hasn't got larger wheels. It also hasn't got a GPS or anything like that, which is standard these days on Super Socos, so the tracking, etc., although you could add it. But I have to say, to ride it, I almost prefer it to a TSX. It's not as jerky as a hub-motored bike. It's very smooth. I like the sort of reassuring sound it gives you when you ride it. It's not totally silent, but it's not noisy either, if that makes sense. So, is £2,120 a good buy versus £2,800 for essentially a bike that has more capability? Because, for example, it can have a rack. There is no rack available for the Cypher that I've found. It can have a second battery. Again, no second battery for the Cypher. But if all you want to do is to have a bike that's de-restrictable, then it is basically your only option. Okay, so hopefully you found that useful. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions or if you'd like to organise a test ride. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And thanks very much.